before Niels Bohr, before Einstein, if you probably heard of this word called the Saundarya Lahari. What does Lahari mean? Lahari is a wave. Okay? Saundarya is splendor. And if you go look at it, at one level, it is the most beautiful description of the goddess in her female form, of the creatrix of the universe. And if you were to look at the interpretive, encoded quality of the physics inside that particular work, it is phenomenal. It talks about dark matter, light. It talks about everything personified in the form of the greatest and greatest of all goddesses. Right? So you had somebody who was that intellectually and emotionally aligned that he could bring and destroy lines of conflict between religions. He could unify faith, and most importantly, he set up a system that survives today. A system that is not rooted in dogma. Let me be very clear. Shankara and his philosophy and his mental state are not rooted in dogma. They are rooted in the absolute science of the self. I can go and have a conversation with an American in Los Angeles and Santa Monica, sitting on the pier and talking to him about Shankara and talking to him about his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. Today, I happened to do that 3 months ago. And this is a guy who's a professor at UCLA, right? He's not a religious professor, he's in electrical engineering, and guess what? He's of Pakistani origin, okay? So, when you're able to transcend lines of that magnitude with incredible intelligence and emotional integrity, you become a true leader. Today, our nation is connected and was connected by the British with probably the most extensive railroad on the planet. Way before the railroad, Shankara anchored the nation with 4 glorious mathas, 4 glorious monastic institutions that essentially combine the ancient doctrines with meaningful ritual. It's really hard. How many people have linear accelerators today? You talk about physics, right? Think about Shankara. In his time, you had no quantum, you had no large experimental thesis work happening. Yet you had the greatest of all sciences that you had at your disposal. So how do you take that and how do you make sure that it survives time, place, matter? That is a phenomenal amount of leadership. Okay? So let me now take you to a much more modern phenomenon number 2, whom I completely respect and have a great amount of love for, is Swami Vivekananda. Right? I think all of you probably know him as being the modern sun of India in terms of its spiritual rebirth and renaissance. Right? So Jairaj had asked me a question about what is the practical, how does all this work practically? How do I test this? Right? I'll give you an experiment. It's if you follow Vivekananda's philosophy, and it involves, at its center, it involves action with an incredible amount of sankalpa. Okay? And the sankalpa has to be extremely selfless. When you're able to tie all those together, if you want to look at a monk who had no money in his pocket, who wandered, he didn't even have the name Vivekananda until he boarded the ship with a few hundred rupees in his pocket to come to the US, right? And he was able to address the Parliament of Religions. And by the way, people donated properties to a mission, Ramakrishna mission, that didn't even exist. So you ask me about practical application of directed selfless intent. There was no profit. The profit was the massive change of mental state of 1 billion people. And that is true selfless profit. So let me bring you back to Silicon Valley today, right? How do we apply these huge truths to our daily lives? Let's start with something small. If intent for us were to be moved from a position of intense selfishness to a position of what is right for one person other than us, try this experiment. I'm running a company. I know a bunch of private equity guys who restructure companies. And I know a bunch of really good public company CEOs who've done a great job restructuring companies. And I always ask them, you know, you talk to Larry Ellison at Oracle, talk to guys who are constantly restructuring companies, and they always come back. I ask them, so what is the characteristic of a good management team? And you know what they say? Shareholder above self. Guys, it is absolutely true. When intent to change is taken outside the scope of selfishness, results must follow. The magnitude of the results are a function of the number or the scope of people that benefit from those results. If you want to go build a temple, I attended the Mahakumbhabhishekam celebrations of the Livermore temple. And I was very, this mic is really annoying. So, okay. So when I asked the founding trustees what the key takeoff point was for the temple, they mentioned very interesting. They actually had bought land in Pleasanton and they got kicked out of Pleasanton for various issues. But what they mentioned was that they actually presented to the city of Livermore, and they actually had a cost-benefit analysis with the then mayor and the surrounding people who owned the land, who built the houses around the current temple. And believe it or not, none of those people are Hindu. But when you are able to take your intent and you are able to transfer that intent with its highest fidelity to a large populace around you, then you can change things very dramatically. I'm not asking you, Vivekananda says, I'm not asking you to be a beggar. I'm not asking you not to be passionate and zealous, but I'm asking you to be directed, right? So the ability to be unselfish and the ability to be directedly unselfish, if used correctly with the emotional triggers that are required, will absolutely get the resultant outcome. So I want to stop there because I think, once again, I feel like I'm talking too much and not having you guys do anything. So we have 15 minutes, and I'm going to, we have something that you're all engineers, right? You're all physics guys, you probably are all PhDs or software engineers. For those of you who are software engineers, it's time to get a little more hardware background. We have a bunch of toilet paper, we have a bunch of glue. You can go around the park, you have 15 minutes. I'm going to set you up to do something. I'm going to divide you into groups of what, 4 or 5?
Yeah, we'll divide you into groups of 5 people.
5 people. So paper comes from trees. You got, I think we have some glue somewhere, or you can go, you have 15 minutes. I don't care how you get it done, right? I mean, to me, it's all about results, right? So let me, before I give you the problem, and I'll have Prasad assist me with stating the problem very crisply. Let me in 2 minutes, take you back to where I started and bring you back to where you are, so that you can have a complete scope in your mind as to what we have experienced today. Number 1, any change you want to effect involves you delving down to the fundamental, absolute, closest to yourself part of your personality. Why? Because that is the only common ground that we have between all of us sitting in this room. We all look different, we all eat different, we all taste different, we all like different things, right? So we have to get to common ground. In order to get to common ground, you have to reach very deep. And the intent that you have to achieve something has to have an emotional and a rational basis. Don't have the rational basis drive the actual transmissal of the intent. Make sure that the emotional basis for that intent is very solid. Then get the rational basis to drive the senses, drive the actions, drive the machine. Okay? If you're able to do that, you will absolutely meet with success. The amount of success that you meet with is directly a proportion of how outward and how unselfish you are. Okay? So that's the basic framework. What did we do today? We started to get you seasoned by thinking outside your intellectual sphere and getting in touch with your emotional sphere. Then we had you create a piece of art. The piece of art reflects both your intellectual and your emotional personality. So now this is all about feeling and thinking, feeling and thinking. Now, we've got the final exercise for today. And by the way, I didn't mention you have Vivekananda and Shankara, both people who affected 1 billion minds. Not one, not two, one public company, you know. They are talking about 1 billion minds who continue to pervade our consciousness. These are the larger than life leaders, which is why they're called Avatara Purushas. Right? Now, and they're all living, they lived in flesh and blood. So, having said all that, now comes the final challenge. And I don't know what I called it, but I said raising yourself and scaling yourself. Right? So, what we're going to do is I'm going to give the mic to Prasad, and he's going to very clearly describe to you what the goal is. After you get split into teams, you have 15 minutes, actually now 12, even better, 12 minutes to get this done. The winning team obviously will all clap for you. The losing team will also clap for you too. But I think I'll let Prasad explain all the pieces at your disposal and the constraints.
Alright, so the objective of this exercise is to get that clock right there off the wall. Now, the rules are you can't use any chair, any table here. You can't hoist anybody on your shoulders. You can't go find a step ladder in the adjacent room and bring it out here and try to get up there. So anything else, you are free on the paper, the pencils, the protractors, the rulers, the cups that you have on the table, anything you have here, you're free to use. Look around and find anything you want and use it. And get up there in 10 minutes and get that clock off the wall. Now, we'll split up into teams first. So, yeah, you can break it. It's the property of the city of Sunnyvale.
Somebody has to physically touch it and get it off the wall. No chairs,
yeah.
No hoisting, no tables.
So can we climb on each other's shoulders?
No, you can't. You can't. Yeah, you can't get anybody up on your palms, or you can't get anybody up on your shoulders. You can't hoist anybody up. You can't lift anybody up physically.
Can do it? If there's a tall person, can they do it?
Well, if you can find a tall enough person in the room here who is part of your team who can get it, then that's fine. But we'll break up into teams here. So let's see how we do this. We'll just start from